Yeah.
Okay, so Oliver, you are a very fascinating man. I'm grateful you're here with me today. And I have been looking at your Instagram and I'm like, oh, he's got some cool things to say. So I invited you on to my podcast and I'm looking forward to like digging through your brain today.
Yeah.
So Oliver is a transformational life coach. He helps change people's lives through powerful conversations rooted in shifting their being. He believes that everything happens for a reason and that our perspective creates that reason. After losing his father at age 16, Oliver went through a whirlwind of even more lessons that ultimately led him to diving deep into his own healing and becoming who he is today. I love this. Oliver's dream is to one day own a farm with multiple Siberian Huskies where he can coach people in person and host retreats. That sounds super fun. So, yeah, thank you so much again for being here. And I let's rewind time
Hmm.
and have you take us back to teenager Oliver and what he went through
Yes.
to get to where you are today.
So, well, we could even rewind it back even further because growing up in a dynamic where my parents also got divorced when I was fairly young, um, and my father's trauma came out in how he parented us. Um, in terms of when someone's not healed, especially as a man, he's going to express himself in a way that isn't going to create a safe environment. And so that was my entire childhood was not a safe environment, going through the divorce. And I was always a scared kid. I was always afraid. I was always extremely shy to the point of my friends thinking I was mute in like middle school or high school because I just wouldn't say anything. I was so deathly afraid to raise my hand, to be called on in class, just so afraid. And so I always had these confidence issues. And that started to change as I got into swimming and my body started to change because I used to be very overweight. I remember I was over 220 pounds as a freshman. So constantly dealing with these self-esteem issues, confidence issues. And then my father passed away from a very rare heart disease. So rare that it blows my mind to actually think that he had it and he wasn't able to get a heart transplant. That was the only way for him to survive. It's called giant cell myocarditis. There's maybe less than 400 cases ever recorded.
Holy shit.
Not yearly, just ever. So it's not very researched a lot. And doing a little bit of research on my end, it seems that that mostly happens to like younger athletes. My dad was in his 50s. So very strange of why that happened and the fact that it did happen and that he was on a machine for a little over a month, and so I never really got that chance to talk to him, to understand him, to hear his last words. And even that last week before he passed away, I didn't really see him. I would slept over my best friend's place, and his dad knew my dad, and he was visiting him every day. And for some reason, I was just like, no, I'm gonna sleep. I was staying up very late, so he would go early in the morning, and I was just like, no, nothing's really changed, he would say, and I'm like, okay. And I remember going on this weekend trip where I went to three different concerts, and to understand where I was at when I was 16 is that I was doing a lot of drugs. I was also starting my entrepreneurial journey as I was selling weed.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of part of the story too, but you know, went to these concerts, doing drugs, and I remember my sister were crazy enough. My sister was at the concert I was at on Sunday, August 6th, 2012, when my dad passed away. But because I had this habit of not telling anyone where I was at, that no one knew where I was. But they called her and she drove and she was there. And I went back to my friend's place, slept over, and she was like, "You need to come home." And I came home and there was the news. And that wrote my destiny. I mean, from the day I was born wrote my destiny. And I even think back that I was born premature and I was like a 50-50 chance for like what my mom had. So even that just makes me think about all these crazy scenarios. So that wrote my destiny in the sense of I went through such a deep level of depression, just completely numb, had to still go to school into my junior year, just I don't care. No one cares. I'm walking around, I'm seeing people, because it was a little bit of a wealthier school district. I'm like, these people are getting cars for their 16th birthday. And I'm like, you don't even understand. Just deep into just depression. Already had the anxiety. And so through that, I kind of used it as a way to numb myself of, oh hey, my dad's not around. My mom did move into the house with me and my brother. Hey, I can sell more. I can smoke in the house. I can do more drugs. I can do whatever I want now because my dad was kind of the like structure there. And so I kept doing that. And it did not go well. I was constantly in this loop of making money, owing money, getting robbed, people breaking into our house, stealing my stuff, stealing my money, getting held at gunpoint twice, losing thousands of dollars, just like not the right scenarios. Bad stuff kept happening, and I was like, God, I'm not supposed to be happy. This is it. Like, hopeless. And that was my belief. That was my perspective of the reason why this happened to me. And so when I put that core belief, what happened was I eventually got into this relationship that was kind of a high school sweetheart. I think she was so to speak, an angel that came into my life, showed me that who she saw wasn't this like drug dealer Ollie, but like the person who didn't care that his grandmother would take him to swim practice and watch me for the whole practice. Like I didn't. I loved her. And that was a 4.5 year long relationship throughout all of college. That was like partly long distance. And I feel like that saved me. But within that was the lesson of codependency. Because I believe that, oh, well, God took my father away, but gave me this person.
Mm.
That already kind of writes the story that this is gonna
Yeah.
might not work. But through that, through college, I remember taking this mindfulness class. And one of the things was like, what is your core belief? And I was starting to step more into my power. I was really improving my body. Fitness was one of my main things. I felt that I wanted to become a personal trainer. I wanted to help people in this way, kind of the same way I helped myself as being very overweight to then kind of improving my body. I was getting into personal development, mindset. I bought some online course that was like teaching me marketing, but you get into that space of entrepreneurship and you start thinking, oh wow, I
Mhm.
don't want to work in a cubicle. I don't want to work some job. Like I'll finish out college, but I already have thoughts of like starting my own business and being a personal trainer and helping people in this way. And that led to the belief from that class, like, what's your core belief? And it was everything happens for a reason. And I started thinking about it. It's like, actually, everything happens for a reason. And it is my perspective that creates that reason. Because the reason before was that I wasn't supposed to be happy because bad things kept happening. I was like,
Yeah.
why? And that shifted. I was like, wait, now my perspective is different. Now what I'm feeling and I'm seeing is that the reason that happened to me, the reason I went through all that stuff is because I feel that I'm meant here for a reason. I'm meant to help people. I went through all of that darkness to be at this place because I'm meant to hold that space for other people and help them heal because the natural curiosity, the natural empathy that just comes out when I'm interacting with people is my gift. And So when I graduated from college, I went through a breakup, and it was very extreme. It felt like my dad was dying again because I was so I thought I was going to marry this person. I thought we were going to be together. We had this love story. I thought we're going to be together till 80. Like, I'm seeing that and then just gone. I'm like, whoa, I have no idea who I am. I just moved back home. I just graduated. What is going on? And so now I had to be in the space of actually learning who I was because I wrapped my entire life around this person because they were going to med school and I was like, I'll follow you wherever you go because like she had structure. I didn't.
Mm.
And so that started even more healing of connecting with friends who were on the similar path, going to retreats, investing a ton of money into other coaches and programs, and going through the work, so to speak, and healing myself and building the habits of meditation and journaling and inner child work. And that ultimately led to where I'm at now. And that doesn't take away that some other stuff happened too. Um, Notably, I think this is an important story. I know I'm bringing all the way full circle, but it's important to kind of reflect all the way to here now. Back in 2021, when cryptocurrency was kind of like going crazy and it was hard not to make money, kind of, and then it started to crash down, I lost focus of my purpose. And this has happened multiple times in my life of like, I know why I'm here, but then you get distracted. This is an important point because I was focusing so much on, oh, this cryptocurrency, I need to make money. And I put a couple $1,000s into this thing and it blew up. I got to like $50,000 in a couple months. I was like, whoa, I've never had this much money ever in my life. This is crazy. God is so funny. He made me go through all this stuff and then this meme coin. It's not even like actual stable coin, just this meme coin called Floki just is my ticket. Oh, wow, God, you're so funny.
Mm.
And then, of course, there's another test. And essentially, I got wrapped into this scam that if I didn't do anything and I just waited a couple months or a month, that 50,000 would have went to 200,000. Now, I
Mhm.
can't say what I would have done if I would have had the actual thought process to take that money out or at least take some of it out. I would have hoped that I would have, but it didn't. And that 50,000 quickly turned to zero because I was chasing. Because when you're at that high is when you're most vulnerable.
Mhm.
Is actually when all the patterns come back. When you feel most safe, right? The illusion of safety is when all the patterns come out. And that happened in 2021. And that was another huge lesson. Because it's kind of like, oh, I'm here. I've gotten to the destination. And then I threw myself out. So I think God was actually telling me, he's like, I'm gonna trick you or I'm gonna test you. And then nope, you're not gonna be successful from this.
Mhm.
You know what you're gonna be successful to.
Mhm.
And last year was just like a full depth of like a very long dark night of the soul, a very long not showing up for myself, like just like lying to myself, not being there for myself, not loving myself, and having it to come full circle into where I'm at now, which is like almost the embodiment of all of these lessons, smacking me right in the face of feeling into, and I felt this before, but feeling into that power of who I am, what I'm capable of, and what I'm meant here to do, and actually having the courage and knowing and trust and faith to step into that. So I wanted to bring that full circle because all of those things are important in this journey of who I am today.
Wow, that was such a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. You said like 25,000 things that I want to pinpoint on, but we don't have time. But okay, so going all the way back to the beginning, it really stood out to me how you said that you were a scared child. And you're always very, very scared. Was your dad physically abusive?
There's two things that come to my mind. He, for some reason, I want to say yes and no. He was. It's called the backhand of love. That's what I would call it.
Mm.
Um, I guess the part of me that says no is like, he never just actually beat the shit out of me. Excuse my language. I don't know if I can curse,
You're
but
fine. Yeah, you're
okay. Some
fine.
people don't like it.
Drop an F-bomb if you need to.
Yeah. All right, great. He wouldn't necessarily beat the shit out of me, but yes, fear was the mechanism of control. So yes, he would hit us. And I think that fear, f- part of me is realizing so much that part of that fear had to stem from that premature baby being pulled out of the womb early and then being attached to all these machines. Like, I can't imagine how afraid I was even then, even if like you could say that I don't know what's going on, but I would just feel that there would be fear there. So
Mm.
part of me is like, it stems all the way from that, or
Mm.
from the fact that I think my mom was stressed as well. Um, through that time, I think during that time, my mother was finding out that my brother was diagnosed with autism.
Mm.
And he's quite high functioning, but as a mother finding out that like that's happening, like you're gonna be feel stressed. So part of me feels that it was a accumulation of that and an accumulation of how my father would interact with us. And I've come to the forgiveness of he was just enacting out his own trauma from his father and his father's father. Like it's generational in that sense. So I believe that's where the fear stemmed from of it's not okay to express myself, or I might say something wrong,
Mm.
or if I do say something wrong, then I'm stupid, or I'm a f up. Because I remember even in elementary school, like second grade or something, like accidentally like playing a little too rough with someone, and I think they like got hurt a little bit. Nothing too crazy. And I remember like running away, hiding, and just shaming myself.
Mm.
Like saying the F word too. I'm like young. Because I remember they called my mom and like picked me up because I guess I was like cursing and someone was like, he's saying bad words.
Mm.
But I just remember that part of me or that memory. I'm like, whoa, that's early to be just pounding shame onto myself.
Yeah, it
So
is.
I think it was an accumulation of all those things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the self-medication with all the drugs makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I got to the point where I was smoking weed every day.
Mm.
Um, never really got into like, um, never really got, I don't want to say hard stuff is different to certain people.
Yeah.
It was more so, it was more so weed, but like, again, it slowly was like every weekend and then like a couple times a week and then every day and like sometimes in school. So it just like
Hmm.
con totally got to a point where I couldn't stop or felt like I couldn't stop. But I never did
But
pills, never did like, you know, I never did like cocaine or crack or heroin. Like it was more so, I guess, psychedelics, which funny enough is now all this stuff is coming out. I was like, actually, this could be good for you.
I know, right?
But maybe not at that age. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Between the age 16 and 18, you should be doing a bunch of mushrooms and acid and MDMA, but it happened. And
It was actually very popular. How old are you?
27.
Oh, well, never mind. I was gonna say, yeah, because when I was in high school, all of psychedelics were really popular because there was like the rave scene, like took over. But you're a little bit younger than me, so
It was,
uh,
I would say
but
it was the same thing. There was the rave scene, and I was just friends with people who were older who I guess had access to that. So I was hanging out with people who were a couple grades above me. So you know they would have access to things, and it would just happen. But some
mhm.
some profound experiences with those two. I think that probably led to the openness um, that I have, but they were definitely used as escapes more than like I'm gonna dive into myself.
I'm gonna go do some ayahuasca and have a yeah life altering journey, like we hear everyone saying nowadays.
No.
Yeah. So when your dad you said your dad was on the machine for a month. Did he just, his health just went downhill all of a sudden and he was like on life support?
So what happened was I was at this 2 week swim camp in Indiana University because my dad went to IU and he sent me there and it was this whole thing. And I remember coming back, and when I came back, he just looked, I think it was like a couple days after I came back. He just looked very pale. He was like not feeling good, and I guess he had um my best friend's dad pick him up and take him to the hospital. And so we went to the hospital, they checked his heart out. They basically said like, yeah, if my heart was a V8, it's now like a two-cylinder.
Mm.
And so I, there's a sense in me that he knew something was wrong for quite some time. I'm assuming he doesn't like he's a doctor, so I'm sure he can tell if like, hey, my heart's not working, what's going on. But he was a stubborn man. He was very prideful, and so getting help was, I think, difficult for him. So he probably waited a little too long. But what happened was he went to the hospital, they checked him out, and then they sent him back. And then my friend's dad was like, "No, you're going back. Why did they send you back? You do not look okay."
Oh my
And so he
gosh.
went back, and because I remember having conversations, they're like, "Oh yeah, your dad's gonna have to wear a defibrillator, an automatic defibrillator." It's like, okay, and I'm just kind of like not being able to realize what could happen. I'm just like, oh, okay, like I'm just constantly thinking like, oh, he's gonna be okay. Like the thought of him not wasn't in there, and so then apparently they were gonna do a biopsy, like basically like check his heart cells, like basically take a little sample of his heart, check it, and I think what happened is as they were doing that or going to do that, he died. Like his heart stopped, and then they had to fly him over. He was at a different hospital, fly him over to like Penn University, Penn Hospital in Philadelphia, and then he was on a machine from that
Mm.
point.
Oh my
And
goodness.
we visited him, and what happened was he would need a heart transplant. Was the only thing they could do, and I think his lungs started filling with water and his liver essentially failed, which is just crazy because he wasn't at the time drinking that much, but he was, I think, struggled with um, alcohol earlier in most of his life. So
Mm.
yeah, his liver failed, and then they couldn't do anything at that point. So
Wow.
yeah,
I I get so frustrated when I hear stories about the medical system and how they just turn people away like that. Seems to be an underlying theme, just so you know. Like I hear that from so many people. I just had a gal on and her husband was like dying from sepsis and they didn't treat him and she lost him because of it. So it's really unfortunate. So we got to do something about this.
yeah,
But yeah, I thought it was interesting also that you brought up the codependency of how you shifted your dad's passing onto this new girl. I think that's actually, just so you know, I think that's a normal thing that we do when we go through grief and we go through like a really traumatic loss like that. I noticed I did it myself when my
yeah.
brother passed with the guy that I started dating after that. It was his friend. They were like best friends in high school and they almost looked the same.
Mm.
It was interesting. They had the same similar build. My brother was 6'8", but he was 6'5", but just like,
6 to 8.
yeah, my brother was a beast. Yeah.
It's a big
And
guy.
yeah, and I noticed, when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I totally resonate that with that, and how we can shift our grief of losing a person and almost like embody the person we lost into a new person. And it gives us comfort.
Hmm.
But then when we lose that person, it's like you're forced to face the grief that you almost like gave away or like projected onto someone else. And because I did the same thing and it was like terrible when we broke up, and I was like, oh damn it, now I have to grieve my brother's loss again, like,
And you're like, oh, this feels even worse.
uh-huh, like double breakup. Shit.
Yeah, it feels like it's so hard for us to love ourselves, and then someone shows up and they kind of like give this safe space of like, oh well, I love you and I accept you, and it's like, oh wow, I can be myself. I actually feel happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's addicting. And it's not to say like there isn't love there. There was love there, but it was so wrapped around this is my entire life. Like this is it. Like, oh, again, like trying to get to the destination of like, oh, I found it. This is my person. And it's not to say like there's nothing wrong with like feeling that way towards a person. It's like, oh wow, yeah, I want to be with you, but I'm not going to sacrifice myself within being with you. And so yeah, I think that's just a very natural thing. I think it happens to people who haven't even experienced something that intense. I think a lot of people fall into relationships because they're experiencing that love and that part of themselves from that person. They're getting their needs met from that person, and so we attach ourselves to that, right? And that's just what humans do. We attach ourselves to all kinds of things,
Mm-hmm.
and then we attach ourselves to the story of things. How like the unfolding of that relationship for me was like such a love story. Oh, because there was so much like flirting and we were on the swim team. And then there's this story of like, wow, it's so crazy that you were even like in line after that meet. And the fact that we even won the meet is like crazy. So just the fact that like from that very moment that like, I was behind you and we saw each other, that like wrote the story, so fall in love with the story and then fall in love like
Mm-hmm.
what the story can be. And so there's so much grieving of like all the time spent and then grieving of like what could have been.
Mm-hmm.
And that I feel that translates too with when we lose anyone, because part of me has thought of I don't know what is worse. I don't know if it's worse that I lost my dad at 16 and I'm not going to have him for the rest of my life, so he's not going to be there when I have kids. Is one of the biggest things. Is like it's not going to get easier. I'm just going to get stronger and need to accept more. But I think about that. My kids are not going to get to experience like the side of him that was so funny and loving and dancing and goofy, and that was really tough. He's not going to be there at my wedding. He's not going to be there when I could say when I'm achieving more things, or I have my own house, or to travel, have a drink with him, or just to still work out with him. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to experience that. So I don't know what's worse. Is it that it happened so young, so there's so much time for me to accept that, or would it have been worse to him to pass away later when I am like 40 or 50, and he's older, and I built this super long relationship with him, and then he passes away because it's I would say that's what typically happens.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an interesting thing that I would think about as I talk to other people who are a bit older that recently lost their father. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what's worse.
Well, I lost my dad at 27 and my son was like 2. And so I've grieved all the same things of like, wow, my son is never going to hear him play the piano. He's never going to
Mhm.
listen to his funny jokes. He's never going to get a happy meal with grandpa or, that was my dad loved McDonald's. And, so I understand. And so for me personally, because I've been through the same loss, I mean, a little older, but I would prefer to have lost them later. So, and then I feel like I would have had that piece of saying, we had a good time.
Yeah.
We had a good time together, like my kids got to know you, like you were there for me, you guided me, you comforted me, thank you. Like I accept your passing. But shit doesn't always hit the fan the way we want it to. But
No.
let's circle back to what you said, what I said in your intro. Everything happens for a reason. So we can sit here and we can talk about the what should have, could have been, and how we wish things would have turned out, but that's not, that wasn't the divine timing. It wasn't meant to be that way. It was meant to be the way it unfolded on purpose.
Yeah.
And after everything I've been through, I love that everything happens for a reason. And a lot of people, it's hard to accept that when you're going through some hell. When you're going through hell and you're like, why would this freaking happen? But it always does. And especially like with my audience and my girls, it's so hard to see that when you're sick and
Mm,
you're like, why the hell would this happen?
I can see that. Yeah.
But I coach and I teach all of my clients. And it's funny because it eventually happens. Like, there is a silver lining to everything. What is it? Start digging into it. And, you start peeling back the layers. So let's talk about that. Everything happening for a reason.
Yeah. And the biggest part about that is the second part. And it is my perspective that creates that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because for all these women who are sick, the perspective in the beginning of that is, why is this happening to me? Like, what the fuck? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all warranted. Like, yeah, like yeah, it sucks. And what you're doing is you're helping shift their perspective to like, well, this happened for a reason. And before, the reason for you was, I'm screwed. What the heck? Why me? Like all of this, all the victim perspective,
Yeah.
right? We're coming from a victim perspective, and you're empowering them into that empowered perspective
Mm-hmm.
of, this happened for a reason. You're stronger from that. Look at all that you've overcome, and now you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that last part I would say is the most powerful, because when we're in it, our perspective is going to be all skewed. And then the transformation and the beautiful part of it is that everything does happen for a reason. And I, part of me also wants to say that nothing actually happens for a reason. If we're looking at a very high point of view, it's like, oh well, things just are. It just is. But in the aspect of a human, you could say like, for God, everything just is. There is no good or bad. Like, humans are making that perspective, but that's the beauty of it,
Mm-hmm.
because then I can extract it and I can make it what I want it to be. And I can choose to make it a higher level truth instead of a lower level truth, right? And that actually is the transformation of that. Well, my perspective was that like I was supposed to be helpless, or that I was not supposed to be happy. God did not want me to be happy. That was my belief. That was the reason why all this was happening. And I shifted to that happened for me to be stronger, to have more empathy, to have these gifts that radically transform people's lives, and to be relatively young and have these perspectives and be able to help people who have gifts themselves, and to help extract those gifts and help those people bring their vision to light. So yeah, yeah,
That's amazing.
I think it's beautiful what you're doing as well, because that's how I'm like seeing it, is that you're going from victim to empowered.
It is very much. And the victim, I feel, for my community is very much, it's the narrative, it's put on them. It's
Mm,
like they go to the doctors simply out of just, like, help, help me. I need help. I don't feel good. What's wrong with me? Very naively, like innocently. And then it's like, oh, well, your thyroid's not working, and oh, you're going to be sick for life. Or even worse, like the Hashimoto's, like your body's attacking itself. And oh, guess what? Now you're going to be medicated for life, and you have to come every 6 weeks and do labs. And it's like they're put in this victim mode, and it's really unfair. And so that idea, that story is imprinted upon them. And just because we're created and built and conditioned to trust these people, We take it on as fact,
Mm,
as their identity, as their truth, and they embody that victim, that sickness, and they go, oh shit, this is what I am now. And they identify as, I have this, I am this. And it's really sad. That happened to me. And when you're in that space of thinking, I am going to be sick for the rest of my life, how can you start to even see any other perspective?
no.
You can't, and so you have to really take a step back and say, and like, you have to just start questioning everything. That's like the first step of like, why do I trust this doctor? Are it just because he's in a white coat? Does that make it real? Does that make him God? Does that make him factual? And so the whole, like, everything happens for a reason. What I really like to point out is like, well, okay, so your body started suffering and you started having symptoms. And if everything happens for a reason, why? What's going on in your life? Let's look at it like whole body perspective, like 360 spin around. How's your relationships? How's your
Hmm.
stress? How's your job? How, like, start just going through every area of the life to see what's out of alignment. How's your
Hmm.
diet? How's your nutrition? What do you drink? Are you, like, how do you sleep? Just all the like main things.
No, I love that. I love that so much because I was gonna ask you if everything is energy and you could say the feeling that when sickness comes into our body, that's not natural. If we're
Mhm.
naturally supposed to be healthy and vibrant and of love, then what is happening energetically to cause this sickness? Like both like in terms of epigenetics, so both environment,
Mhm.
one our genes being played into that, so
Mhm.
right, and then the other side of what is the intangible things that we're not seeing, right? Right, the stress, our beliefs,
Mhm.
our relationships, right? And I think with the doctor, people forget that's just another human being that was told how to do things and to learn certain things. They equally, in a sense, have no idea what's going on. No one knows what's going on. No one. Right? We're all just trying to figure it out, and then we can accumulate some knowledge and concepts and experience, and it helps us to help guide other people that might not have experienced that. But that's just another person, and he only knows what he knows or she knows, right? And so there's that authority bias. I mean, there was a whole research thing on that I don't want to get into, but yeah, that's a thing. It's like a
Mhm.
cop, a doctor, a lawyer, just someone who we feel is more prestigious than us. And so in terms of the victim mentality, it's, our words and thoughts are creating our world, right? We're not describing the world that we're seeing, we're literally creating it. So if I'm describing it as a harmful place where I'm sick, well, that's going to be the world that we're continuing to create. And so you are empowering them so much. Well, they're getting empowered through the questioning. Now they're getting curious. It's like that inner voice is coming up of like, wait, is this really what I have to settle with? So I do think from the beginning, because if someone's coming in and they're telling you something and you believe it, you're already in that victim frame. Maybe not that like you feel deep and know, oh, I'm a victim, and then they tell you, and you're like, oh, what the heck? But if you're allowing someone to come into your frame and tell you who you are, and it's a disempowered way of telling you, like they're not like bringing you up, they're literally like, yeah, we don't know, or we can't help you, or they don't care enough to like recommend you to someone, then we're accepting that, right? So I see that as what were the other beliefs that they were believing in the beginning of their life? What beliefs were they told as a child or as uh-oh, do we have technical difficulties?
I'm sorry, I just got like a battery notice. I guess my plug wasn't all the way plugged in. My
Uh-oh.
bad. But yeah, exactly, exactly. I love it. I love how you're like, you can't let them come in and like disempower you, because that's exactly what's going on. And so that brings me to your mission of this. I love how you write being. It's like capital B, capital E, ing. What is being to you?
Mm. Being is everything that I am at all times.
Everything that I am at all times.
Being is a culmination of my thoughts, my emotions, my beliefs, the view of the world, all wrapped into who I am. And so it's the energetic frequency that I'm putting out. And in a bit more of a technical manner, I like to look at being from the stand when we look at be, do, have, right? Where most people are like, what do I need to do to have what I want to be that thing? Or what do I need to have to do the thing to be it, right? It's a faulty model. That's what everyone's trying to do. Instead of being, right? Because we can create our being. We can create who we're showing up as and who we need to show up as. So I look at being as well from like a little exercise point. Being equals your values, your standards, and your beliefs. And you could also add like characteristics and essentially identity. So being is a culmination of who I want to show up as,
That's deep.
right?
Yeah.
And then the next phase, once you know that, right? So it's not what does Sarah need to do to have the impact she wants so she can be um, the number one speaker on thyroid or the number one coach on thyroid, or that she needs to have the publicity or a certain amount of testimonials to start doing the work to be that person. Instead, it's who do I need to be? Who is that person already? Who is the person in that vision that you see who is stepping on stage, who is impacting people internationally, who is publishing her book? Like, who is that person already? And you think about, okay, what are their values? What are their standards? What are their beliefs? Right? What are their characteristics? How do they show up? You think about that. You start with that, and then you go from that place. What would that person do? What are their habits? What are their actions that they would take? And what are their behaviors? And now you can tell the disconnect between the being and then the doing. And that acts as a feedback loop. Because if we're saying we're this person and we're not doing, and we're not, the behaviors don't match up, habits don't match up, and the actions don't match up, then what we have is going to tell us, hmm, where's that gap? Where's that disconnect? And then the work is going into there. It's like, okay, so actually not being this person. So what do I need to shift? And then you start playing with that, and then you can have that constant becoming who you're meant to be, right?
Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard anyone explain it like that. That was
Yeah,
such a good, clear breakdown. Good job.
thank you.
But yeah, it is something like this is exactly what you have to do in order to overcome, in my opinion, kind of anything. It's for my ladies, especially uh, illness, because illness really starts at a spiritual level. Everyone focuses on the physical,
Yeah,
But in reality, you're spiritually sick first. So where did that, why? Why did that start? And so what you were just saying, you know, one of the first things I had to do was sit down and get clear with myself of just, who am I? That's the hardest freaking question to answer ever, especially for women, because we put our identities into so many outsourced things. I'm a mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a wife. I'm a girlfriend. We outsource ourselves, you know? So for women sitting down and going, who am I? It's almost like you don't even know. You're like, shit, where do I begin? Like, well, and that's something that I have to constantly, as I evolve, it's something I always have to come back to and get clear on. Like, who am I? And I encourage anyone listening to this to just literally sit down with a pen and paper and start there. And then, like you said, you can start going into all the other details of like, well, what are my standards? Especially again for women with like boundaries with relationships. And I don't mean just boys, you know, they're friends. We can have such shitty boundaries with our friends that'll call and dump on us constantly, and they're so negative. The girl drama, the gossiping, you know, it's terrible. It's so energetically depleting. And you can't participate in that if you want to get better, you know? And so the standards of like, what are my values? What do I believe in? Again, some of the hardest things to answer because we outsource even those. Am I a Christian? Am I a Catholic? Well, why do you identify with those?
Yeah, yeah.
Who told you that?
Where's the story coming from? Because
Yeah.
that's all it is. And oh man, it's so interesting, especially like physical manifestations of things. Because if we to be empowered that we are an unlimited creator, that we can create our being, that we're creating the world we live in, that and we can create the life that we truly want, then we need to accept that that we created our sickness as well.
Amen.
And
Amen.
that's probably the hardest part because it's like I don't want to believe that. It was the
Yeah.
environment, it was this, and it's like all of those things can be factors. But if you're going to believe that you can get better and you can heal this and then you can create a new life for yourself, then you have to believe the other side. You're not going to pack a bunch of light onto the darkness that you don't want to accept. That like for even to accept this, to even to accept that, you have to accept that in some way, shape, or form, you created that sickness.
Yeah. And I would get so pissed off when people would say that to me. And I'd be like, why would I want to do this to myself? Do you think I wanted to create 25 symptoms and 7 food intolerances and my hair falling out and no energy, anxiety attacks to the point where I thought I was going to die going grocery shopping? Why would I create that for myself? But then I actually, you have to start taking so many perspectives. You have to zoom out so far on your life, sometimes 10, 20 years, zoom out on your life and go, okay, if I did create this, where did this begin and why?
Mm.
And so for me, it was like the creation wasn't my fault. I felt like it happened to me, but in a way, if I go back further, it was like, well, the creation started with my husband cheating on me. But why did I marry a guy that would cheat on me? Why did I marry this low value, low standard man? What was wrong with me when I was 22? Why did I settle? And then 7 years later, why did I stay with a man who I knew that was abusive? And then the abuse just continued into adultery.
Mm.
And then why did I choose to continue to stay with him another 7 years and endure a lot more abuse? So the creation is there and you can answer it, but it's really, you got to get ballsy with yourself and really start owning up to shit. And it's not to beat yourself up or anything. It's to really, this is where the silver linings start coming in. And you can say, okay, Well, if all of these things happened and I chose this person, I chose this life, I chose to stay, I chose these things, you have to realize, because I felt stuck. I remember thinking, I'm stuck. I got kids with this guy. I have no job. I have no money. I'm stuck. I'm trapped.
Hmm.
And I was repeating that story constantly. And that story was making me feel depressed. And the depression was manifesting in more symptoms. But it all started in my beliefs of me and my situation. And so once I realized that I was never stuck and I was creating my reality. So if I could create anything else I wanted, what would I want? And I started asking myself these questions. Well, I want to go back to college. I don't want to be married anymore. I want a degree. What else do I want? I want to do cartwheels. And what else do you want? I want to eat ice cream. And what else? And I want to go play. And I want to have fun. And I don't want to just be in mom zone. I don't want to just do chores and cook dinners. Like, this is boring. I want to live life and I want to enjoy. And I want to do something for me, And I was like, and so when you start, like you said, you start actually you shift that perspective of everything happens for a reason. And I started shifting my perspective. Okay, well, why did this happen for a reason? But okay. And it's just like, so you start the zooming out, the perspective shifting, and then asking yourself the questions. It's fucking life changing. And then you'll start to connect all of the symptoms to all of the stories and all of the trauma and all of the environment and all of the things. And like you said, epigenetics, Dr. Bruce Lipton, the guy's amazing. And it was actually him that told me genes do not play into this. Genes are changeable, they can turn on, turn off. So don't ever sit and think the victim of like, oh, my genes did this to me. That's a mind fucking in and of itself. Because then you're a victim to your hereditary. Like, that's terrible.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it all comes back to if I am an unlimited creator, to hold that belief, then I also need to accept that I've created everything that I've that I've technically gone through in some way, shape, or form, and where I'm at right now, which also means that I'm completely empowered to create what it is now I consciously want, right? So it's going from that unconscious uncompetency, like I'm not even conscious of what I'm not competent about. So to say, well, I didn't want this, why would I do this for me? It's like, well, how much of your life has been unconscious to this point? The majority of it. And then it goes conscious uncompetency. So now we become conscious of our uncompetency, of our negative thoughts, of our sickness. And oh, wow, okay. And then we go conscious competency. So now we're becoming conscious of changing those things, right? Which is kind of like putting in the effort to build the habits, putting in the effort to build the beliefs, and then we go into the realm of full embodiment, which is unconscious competency, and now we just are that. So we have to realize like that's the kind of steps of awareness, so to speak. And so you've been, for the majority of people, unconscious of how you've been operating, and so yeah,
Yeah.
of course. At first, the questioning is going to be like, why did this happen to me?
Well,
And
what you're saying, and thank you for saying that, because for me, I realized I was just following the indoctrinated plan of my life.
hmm,
Of like, we grow up, we graduate high school, we do some college, and we get married, then we have some babies, and we find a house. That was actually what was running my life.
another story.
Another fucking story that I didn't want. And it just led to misery, which it does for most people, because like we all want to be able to explore and find out who we are after high school.
Yeah,
It's like we're
it's not.
released from the prison.
Yeah, and it's not your story. That's the thing. We think that we'll get what we want if we just follow someone else's story or some other story, because we're not empowered yet to realize that we can create our own story.
Mm-hmm. And we don't
Because
have
we're
to follow the societal norms to be
no,
accepted.
no, not at all. And most of all of that's coming from is from fear. because
Mm-hmm.
the you could say the persona in us, the ego part of us, is always going to be rooted in fear. It's just fear based. That's why we attach to things, because we're afraid that we won't get it anywhere else. When we're getting it from in here, we can get it from ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the ego is always going to attach. That's also like that's just a human thing. Right? The ego helps us create an identity. The ego helps us create success and results in the world. So the ego isn't a bad thing. Um, it becomes bad if we're listening to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think this quote that a friend shared was, "The mind is an the mind is an excellent servant, but a terrible master."
Mm-hmm.
You could say
It's
like
so true.
part of that is the mind is the ego. So the ego is an excellent servant, but a terrible master. And most of us just let the ego be the master. Where if we can sit in, for me, I sit in the belief that like God comes through me, and that you could say that's spirit, whatever the word is. Let's just say God or spirit. Is that if I can come from that place, then I can meet all my needs. I am always taken care
Mm-hmm.
of,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm in love, and I am love.
Mm-hmm.
And then forgiving myself. So when you were talking about why did I do that? Why would I choose that? And all these decisions, and you're thinking back of like the root cause of everything, all the healing, which I'm sure, like, which is what you went through to get to this point, is forgiving all of those versions of ourselves. I forgive myself for having the belief that I wasn't worthy enough to be in a relationship that actually felt good, or
Mm-hmm.
that I was worthy, or that the belief that I felt was worthy of abuse. And so we,
Mm-hmm.
we forgive all of those versions of ourselves, and then get to the place of like, I love and accept myself for who I am. I am love. And from this place, what do I want to create?
You want to hear something crazy too?
Yeah.
So, as I have, one of the things I started doing was just like trying out different healing modalities. I was like, what's Reiki? What's energy healing? What's a shaman? What are all these things? And it's been so crazy. The things that I've learned about myself doing the hypnotic meditation, breathing, and everything. And one of the things that I actually learned that blew my mind, and probably blew everyone's mind hearing this because it's not normal, is I actually learned that there was a energetic signature that's passed. Okay, so energy, not like literal DNA, RNA, but energetic signature that's been passed through my mother's line, the female, maternal side of this pattern of being with abusive, addictive, poor men. And I had did this incredible healing ceremony with a shaman who broke the curse, generational curse per se.
Mm,
And I had this really incredible experience where it was like I saw my grandmas dancing around me, and they were so thankful that that wasn't going to continue on to the next generations. And they showed me the symbol that I was like this diamond on the top of a triangle, my family line. And so one of the things that I've realized through all of this is like not only am I healing myself, but I'm healing my grandmothers, and I'm healing my daughter and my future, you know, kin. And the ancestral healing is so incredible when you start getting to that point as well.
mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's extremely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that, because it makes me, it's like, the consciousness holds on to that information and those beliefs into ourselves, and then and then it's like it stays there, and then we have the choice of um, changing that. But the thing is, like, you created that. Like, you created that entire scenario to even have that experience. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what's so beautiful. And I feel like that's happening. We're like right now in the timeline we're in. It's like that seems to be happening a lot more. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, one of the things that I read was, I don't know if you're familiar with David Hawkins' work, but he created the map of consciousness, kind of showing this scale from down the shame all the way up to enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was showing how when the internet came out, that the boom in consciousness just shot up so high because if the collective consciousness is all kind of about like information, and it's about information, everything everyone's experiencing all being kind of like recorded. Once the internet came out and so much information was available to other people, that now consciousness just had like an exponential curve up. And so it's been good. And then the other side has been the negative of, you know, both things. The internet's just neutral. So there's going to be bad information that's being flooded and bringing more fear into people's lives, as we have kind of seen in the last couple years since
Mm-hmm.
COVID. And then also the other side of so many people coming into their power and
Mm-hmm.
healing and ending generational traumas and curses, and being that um, generational empowerment, like that avatar, like that story. So
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
I love that.
So the one last thing I want to touch on is your messaging to men. I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's this massive disconnect on masculinity nowadays, and I feel like it's gotten trampled on and lost, like the warrior, like where'd they go? We need our warriors, we need our men. And I see you speaking to that. And because you are younger, you're gonna definitely hit the younger generations. And um, I don't know, like I messaged you, I was like, I feel like I need my son to hear this because he's 18. And we talked about that, but just like, I really crave this like teaching to come back on how men can be good men again. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's extremely important because as someone who you could say, one, I think there was, I want to preference before I say this, I think there was qualities that my father was trying to show me that were good. He was just too far into certain aspects where it became um, uh, harmful. There
Mm,
were aspects within him as a man that I think were good, like hard work, creating your own things, taking responsibility, being real, being honest, and other things. But yeah, kind of going through the trauma that I went through as a kid, and then also losing my father, it was like my whole identity around being a man, masculinity was already skewed because I would always kind of lean to my grandmother or lean to my mom, and then obviously when my father was gone and didn't have any strong male figure, um, so I think this is a reflection to what also happened earlier in America's history when all the men went to war. And so, it's nothing against the women, but this just happens when the women have the responsibility to take care of the boys, and the
mm,
boys have no strong male figure to help raise them, because that's part of what learning to be a man is a part of, is to see other men, help with that and guide that. And so that was taken away. And so what happens is strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create and bad times create strong men. And so
full
it's a cycle.
circle.
Yeah, so it's a cycle that happens. And I don't know if that necessarily has to repeat itself, but that's just kind of what has happened. And what I'm seeing is because of that, because there's no initiation, like let's go even like thousands of years back all the way in the day when we were like tribes, so to speak, there was initiations, even in like Roman time. There was initiations from a boy to a man. from a boy to a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, there was like trials where the boy was stripped away from his mother, and he was like, "Oh no, no," right? And then had to become a man,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's none of that. There's none of that anymore. So we just have a bunch of men who are really boys. They're still in the boy psychology, or they're in the shadow side of the masculine archetypes that I like to talk about, which is king, warrior, magician, lover. And that is what I see in today's world is a reflection of either people still in the boys, they're still just boys, or that they're in the shadow side of those archetypes, or they're like in one archetype, but they're not in the other. So it comes out in reflections of like, you know, all I do is take action and I'm a warrior and I'm doing all these things, but I'm not empathetic and I'm cold and I don't know how to be vulnerable and, you know, or introspect into myself. So, yeah, sure, someone could be a warrior, maybe a bit of a king, but he's not in his magician or lover. So so his relationships are affected. He doesn't know himself that much because he's not actually taking that introspection. He's not letting his creativity come out or his ability to connect with nature. So, what I'm seeing fully is that men don't feel empowered in themselves, and so they're lying to themselves. They're lying to themselves, and either they're way too far in their masculine, where it is the toxic part of it,
Mm-hmm.
or they're actually in their feminine, and they
Way
don't know how
too
to.
far in their feminine.
Yeah, like they don't
Yeah.
know how to stand up for themselves. They don't know how
Mm-hmm.
to like, take action towards their goals. They think they just need to cater their life around women and just please women. And it's like that's not
Mm-hmm.
what she wants. She wants you to be real, to
Mm-hmm.
meet your needs responsibly, to be honest, and to lead in a loving way, right? Because
Exactly.
that's what also helps to make it safe for women to be in their feminine. And most men are just like, oh yeah, whatever. And then it's like,
I call them the soy boys.
yeah, or they're not doing the work to heal that boy
Yeah.
inside of them that wants so much to be seen and wants so much to be loved. Because, also for a lot of men, I'm seeing that we grew up and it's like, well, this is what it means to be a man. Don't show your emotions, don't cry, suck it up. And
Mm.
and and there's an aspect to like the mental attitude of I'm not going to allow my emotions to control my decisions um as a man, because that's part of the masculine energy is me being able to hold my frame when anyone comes up to me and their emotions are a bit chaotic, and me not being affected by those emotions.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean I'm not feeling any of it. Actually, I'm feeling all of it. I'm not pushing it down, I'm not suppressing it. I'm feeling all of it, but I'm not allowing their expression, their emotions to affect my expression and my emotions. And that's what the masculine has to be. It has to be the ship, right? That is navigating the ocean. And the ocean, right, is the feminine. It's huge, it's expansive. That's where creation starts,
Mhm.
right? It's where life literally begins and it is cultivated. But the ship has to go to the direction, it needs to know where it's going, and needs to navigate the calm seas and also the chaotic storms and still get there. And so I'm seeing so
Mhm.
many men hold on to the story that they can't express themselves and they're just suppressing and repressing so much down, and that's coming out, right? And then it's coming out in a quite negative way because they're so insecure of themselves.
Yeah. And then we have a lot of broken relationships and damaged and mashed up people and divorces and, you know, it's just, yeah, like a lot of very lost people right now. But actually, the collective conscious is coming back. There's a lot of reconnecting to self. And I think calling in men, like you said, I love how you said, like, we're going through these hard times and it's creating men. It really, truly is right now. I feel like our role dynamic and everything, it's like it's separating. You
Yeah,
can
men,
see the separation of
men need
men.
to men need to step up.
Yeah.
Like Like literally hold yourself to higher standards. And the
Yeah.
biggest thing is show up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
work out, eat better, physically challenge yourself, mentally challenge yourself. Like dive deep into yourself, heal the parts of yourself that need your forgiveness and need your love.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to be empathetic. Learn to master your emotions so you're not making emotional decisions, you're making decisions from your heart, right? That's not feelings I would say are different than emotions. Me
Mm-hmm.
feeling love is different than than the emotion of fear that comes up when I want to do something scary or when I'm perceiving something to be scary, right? And the thing that's helped lead me continuously over the last this year specifically is a quote of, if my intention is pure, like if my intention is good, and I know that my intention is to deepen the connection within ourselves to raise the collective consciousness of the world. It's my vision, right? So if that's my intention with everything I'm doing, then God is on my side. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a specific quote in the Bible, and again, I'm not Christian, I'm not even, I would say, religious, but I ascribe to these certain scriptures. If God is on my side, then who can be against me?
Oh, I love that.
And so it's like the knight wasn't absent of fear going to slay the dragon. He just had faith and knew that God was on his side, and regardless of how he felt, that he had to go and do that. Because that's what his responsibility was, to help protect the people, and that's part of a man's job. It's not just to protect. It's to build ourselves up to create safe environments for things to flourish, because that's what a good king does, right? We can talk all about
Mm-hmm.
patriarchy and whatever, but think about when a good king was there. The good king wasn't in his ego. He knew that the energy that he was using to generate for everyone, to make a safer place, to create order out of the chaos,
Yeah.
right? To make things more fertile. He knew that the energy wasn't his, that the energy you could say was God's, and that's actually what king energy is. It's like you're a steward of that. So good king would always make good times, right? And people
Mm-hmm.
people forget that because there were so many
And they
bad kings.
flourish.
Yeah, and it brings,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess you could say, makes me think of like I guess the Renaissance, like the wave of art. There was that like um there was those good times um
Mm-hmm.
that I'm sure that like leaders created. And so then what was there? There was a boom of creativity and
Mm-hmm.
imagination and art. And that's what happens when men can step up, especially in a world that's so masculine, and allowing some of the women that aren't as naturally masculine to feel safe in stepping into their feminine.
That's so huge. I cannot tell you.
Uh, uh, you know,
That is like, I love that you're touching on safety. Like, women instinctively need safety, period. First things first, we have to feel safe, or we're going to be in fight or flight. Do you want your woman in fight or flight? Or do you want her feeling safe
no,
and nourished?
I don't want my woman in the warrior. I don't want her
Right,
ready to fight the enemy. I want her
right.
to that's why well, like when I know in when starting to date and stuff, and in my last relationship, I saw the aspect of this kind of fall away, which is a whole other learning lesson that I recently have gone through, and seeing like what happens when you don't show up for yourself as a man, and how that translates. But I always come back to the sense of like, I want her to feel safe, that she can be in her feminine and let her know that I got it. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
even need to mean financially. It doesn't need to mean like I mean that's part of it, is like, hey, I got it. You don't The whole point is I got it. You don't need to worry.
Mm-hmm.
How much do women are just like planning things and worrying about things? It's like, oh no, I planned it all. I got it. You're good. Just wear something nice, look beautiful. Like we're gonna have an awesome time. It's gonna be fun. And it's like, whoa, I can actually relax. I can actually like
Mhm.
take it in, and the amount that I would say that women are able to take that in is part of their work, is like, because there are like masculine wounds of um things from the past, but that's what the biggest thing I'm just feeling into so much is men need other men to help raise their standards of who they can be mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. All of it. I think it's all important. I don't care how much money you make. If you're not leading yourself physically, what are you doing? All the men. And this isn't, and I go back and forth because I'm not trying to shame anyone. It's more so just like, no, hold yourself to a higher standard.
Mm.
Like physical fitness and health in that way, just eating better,
Mhm.
training, is such a low hanging fruit. It is actually wild to me to think that people don't exercise. But I'm like, you know how much research is out there that it is like the miracle drug?
Yeah.
like it's wild actually. It's like everyone would feel better if they got exercise and also strength training. Some people don't like that, but just a form of like building strength is so good for our bodies and
Mhm.
mentally for men too. When you just push yourself in that way, like you start building confidence. You start and like I think there's an aspect to yeah, I think every man should be able to look in the mirror and be like, damn, I look good. That's me.
Mhm.
That just like feels good. Like take the vanity out. Like you're just like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
love myself.
I worked
Yeah.
for that. Like that this
Yeah.
doesn't take like this is hard work to get to this point.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's just low hanging fruit. And then the mental side, and that comes to other because exercise, eating better is going to help your brain and your mental. And then it's really, if we take it all the way back, take a full circle back to the being, it starts with who do I need to be the man that I'm meant to be to to create a better life for the people I love, to create a better world, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, you're so right. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. There's a definite need for men to hear your message. And so, as a mom, as a woman, looking for that high quality man who's going to be, you know, not putting his focus on porn or girls online and really just like loving and appreciating his woman and raising good children and having that safe, stable home. You know, there's such a desire and a need for that, and like you're saying, the kingdom. And I think if men really focus on building their homes and everyone really just elevates their own living situation, then as a society, we're going to all naturally up level as well and come back to those good standards and values as a whole. And I think it really does start with that leadership.
mhm.
Women love leading too. We're both equal, but we have different ways and different styles of leading. And I love that we can come together or, and complement each other like that. But it does start with a strong foundation. I do believe men are the foundation. Women are a foundation too, but I really believe that men are that strength. And we need that back, So
Yeah,
thank you so much.
yeah, and I want to touch on one more thing that you said there because it's to take even like men out of the picture. The masculine energy is the foundation because if water is the feminine, well, water forms to whatever it is that whatever container it is in. And if earth is, you could say, masculine, well, then look at what the masculine have. Look at a river. What does the masculine do? It literally shapes where the water goes and it creates boundaries. And so the masculine is the container. So it literally is the foundation of the feminine, which is just like, which is almost like everything. It's like endless. It's like infinite. And the masculine is able to like hold it and be like,
Mhm.
let's bring the beauty here and not. And then what happens is people try to control that. It's more so like, let's hold the space for this,
Mm.
right? To let it flourish, right?
I love that because it's like, I never thought about it that way. Wow, that's a really cool visual. It's like the men like shape those boundaries of the river, and then the women are the water, and then look at what the water does and everything that blooms and blossoms and multiplies around that. Because that's what women do. We bloom and we blossom and we multiply everything around us. If we feel
Yeah,
safe, we feel grounded, we feel well. It's like we are the up levelers. We will come in and make your life gorgeous if you create that environment for us to.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that too, because you're right. Because if it's just like two pieces of rock and there's no water, there's not going to be no life.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you brought that analogy full circle because you're totally right. The water that comes in creates that life and makes it beautiful.
Mm-hmm. That's what we do. We make everything beautiful as
Hmm.
long as we're allowed to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Why don't you share with everyone where they can find you, what you have to offer?
Yeah. So the main focus for me right now has been Instagram. So you can find me at Oliver Fehlandt. Last name is spelled Fehlandt. Yes, I've had to do that a lot in my life. So at Oliver Fehlandt. And really what I do for people mentioned in the beginning is I change people's lives through powerful, transformative conversations. And so I always come from the place of that. My coaching, my programs are the person that I have no idea of the possibilities of what you can create until we talk. Because my coaching is working on someone's being, and that comes out through your speech, through your stories, through how you're thinking about the future and how you're speaking about how you're talking about the past, how you're talking about the present. And then that's where the magic happens. And then that's where I see
Cool.
all little things where someone's limiting themselves, not thinking big enough, holding themselves back, keeping the stories. And then that's where the work happens.
And that's actually really important. Some people might say, like, well, why would I need that? If you, when you're trying to change or get better or up level, you have to have someone in your life who's going to ask you the questions. It's a mirror. You'll have to have someone to put up the mirror in front of you and say, why, where, and get you thinking out of your box, out of your conditioning. And it's it's powerful. So I'm sure, I mean, just from the conversation I had with you today
Yeah.
and that we've had online, like, I'm sure your clients get a lot of value through you and change significantly.
Yeah. It's gratifying work.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty wild what happens when you are able to love someone unconditionally to the point that you're not trying to cater to their needs. And so you're so honest with someone that it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like right there is the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of things that I've seen common with the clients that I work with is one, people who are constantly showing up for other people. They're constantly serving other people. They're maybe in some type of leadership role, or maybe it's with their family, but they're not showing up for themselves and they're not leading themselves and serving themselves. And so they're trying to pour from an empty cup.
Mm-hmm.
And I come in and show like, hey, if you really want to love everyone in your life, like you're saying you are, but you're actually lying to yourself because you're the example of love that you're giving out. And so by loving you, you're loving them. And so let's start loving you again. Let's start really diving into that of why you feel like you need to sacrifice yourself for everyone else besides yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that ties into healing, people pleasing, self sabotaging, um, doing inner child work, as well as empowerment work of getting them to the place of like, what do you want to create and who do you need to be to create that? And so, like, creating their being, right? And with the habits as well, keeping them accountable to those things too, bring it full circle and working through like where those disconnects happen. So,
I
it's a
love
lot of
that.
work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you guys reach out to him, follow him, enjoy his goodness. And if you want to work with him, DM him, right? They can just DM you.
Yeah,
Okay.
send me a message. We start with connection, start with a conversation. I have no idea what I can help you with or what will unfold. And I believe that coaching can't really be a concept. It's like if I talk to you about if you've never been on a roller coaster and I try to talk to you about the experience I had on a roller coaster, you're gonna be like, oh wow, that's a cool concept. And then you
Mm-hmm.
go on a roller coaster, like, whoa, this is extremely different than what I thought. So I always allow people to experience coaching firsthand because this entire thing that I'm doing is service. This is my
Mm-hmm.
purpose. So if I can show up, I can take people all in through a coaching experience, transformational experience, and they get something out of that, and then just that one call is like if that one call changes their life, it doesn't even matter if we work together.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens sometimes is people have that experience, and they're like, yeah, I would actually be interested in knowing like what this would look like more long term because it's like, yeah, imagine if we did this, every other week
Mm-hmm.
or once a week, like it'd be very powerful and you'd have this support and I would constantly be in your corner. But other than that, I always say like, there's no obligation to that. I'll still be in your corner. I'm never like, oh, I don't want to work together. Like, get out of here. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, that's
Yeah.
not the point. So I always allow people to go into that experience and see what unfolds. Right?
Cool. That's cool. That's a different concept than most coaches. So that's cool.
Yeah,
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'll talk to you later.
awesome.